Well, that's good because they need some challenge. They've been getting away with too much shit for too long, you know. So that's, you know, we'll start to work on some of that because historically, geez, we got everything in our favor. We got tons. It's just that a whole lot of people spin their wheels on stuff that really isn't important or not so important. I guess it's all important, but there's parts of it that are more important than others that we can use specifically to directly help us, you know, rather than beating around the bush and, you know, a whole lot of stuff there.
And we always have to guard because they're always trying to interpret the meaning or on our part, from our side, totally out of the document, you know.
Yeah, well, it's all definition.
Yeah. And you know, and I always advocate to everybody. I said, no, but you can't use Caucasoid legal opinions on anything. Where the heck were they 1,000 years ago? They didn't affect our rights, and they still don't affect them today. And the other I like to use is if we had brown-skinned people now giving us legal opinions, they would all be for us.
Yeah.
So where's the meaning to their attempts to denigrate our right?
Yeah. So with that, I could carry on with that. So I was mentioning this to Mr. Marshall yesterday before I left, and I told him, look this thing up. So I'll give it a little close up. I got to teach myself how to screen share properly, but so this is the Royal Arms of Nova Scotia, New Scotland. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, have you ever been party to this before? Anybody?
No one existed until speaking with you yesterday.
Okay, so this is the Royal Arms of Nova Scotia, and so it has the motto. Here, I'll try and read it out a little better. And what it's saying is the motto is "Munit haec et altera vincit." One hand defends and the other conquers. You wonder why you can't get your lobster situation worked out.
Okay.
All right, so what we're dealing with here, so New Scotland is this creature right here.
Oh yeah.
And so you see the representation, the symbolism. How many unicorns have you ever seen?
Yeah.
It's a mythical creature.
Yeah.
So Scotland is a mythical creature, and it's bound with a golden chain. You see it?
And he's tongue.
Okay. Yeah. So the golden chain is being held here by a red shield.
Okay.
That's Rothschild.
Yeah.
And that's the symbol of Hess, the lion. That's a German mercenary army.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
This is your ancestor. And you see the hands here? Okay.
Yeah.
One hand defends while the other hand conquers. And this is the relationship that you're constantly in.
Yeah.
And so we can look at you can carry on in like the symbol of Virginia, and you'll see it, Sic Semper Fi Tyrannus, always thus tyranny. And so they have their symbolism here. So this is the helm of a sword, which is also a shield, right? And so you have to deal with this. This here is a thistle, right?
Looks like
interesting. So that's what I wrap that up for you in a nutshell. That's what you're stuck with here, that you're fighting it with, is this situation where you have to constantly defend yourself.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And is that that's what you explained there? Is that the same analogy where you put it where you're give us money and we'll have protection?
So that's the arms of England. That's the Royal Arms of England. So on the Royal Arms of England, they tell you the symbolism is Honi Soit Qui Mal Y Pense, which is evil to him who thinks evil of it.
Mm.
So that's that situation of pay us, we'll protect you, that's what we're dealing with here all the time.
Mm.
And so we have to understand that. And so when we go into the court of law, the blazon on the back behind them on the wall is that symbol. Honi Swaki Mali Pants. They've changed it in relationship to the Statute of Westminster that was issued for Canada, and then they changed the motto to Admare Usk Admare, from sea to sea.
Mm.
Right? So that's a little taste of the Admiralty law of the Commonwealth under the vassalage of the English crown as it relates to the papacy.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1537, there was a papal bull that was issued called Sublimis Deo. And in 1537, it says, the Indians of the West and of the South, and other people of whom we have recent knowledge. And so I believe that we're the other people that have never been addressed. And so instead of identifying who we were and who we are, they carry on with their implied title of Indians, which carries over from all the conquering of Europe. So, it becomes a fiction of immense proportions.
Symbol of Caucasoid racism. That's what it is. That's become their symbol there. Their determination to hold on to their racism.
Yeah. And, it's just throwing around fear and anger and coercion and duress. It's all a system of crisis, hoax, and cover-up that keeps them in power. And nothing but. I don't think there's very little legitimacy to their modus operandi.
Mm.
It's always got some deceitful agenda inside it, right? I've done my fair share of history, and I can see that there's no real benefit for us. There's always some other vice that we're their purpose, their meaning, their reason. It's always sitting there. They want to put us over the barrel, so to speak, all the time with any action that happens. And so when we start to bring about what they're calling Aboriginal title principles, which I refer to as original title principles, because I have a hard time agreeing with their version of reconciliation. So when you dig up, I have a version of or I have a mention of the position that the Crown believes is the reconciliation, is that the Native people have to change their idea in order to coincide with the rest of Canada, which I believe is backwards. Canada needs to change its way in order to reconcile with the Native.
Yeah.
It's not this. This is what they're giving you. Whose hand is conquering and whose hand is defending?
Yeah, exactly.
So, just from that piece of symbolism, you can use that, show your people, here's what's going on.
Yeah.
How do you counteract that? You want to fight about lobsters? We're fighting about marijuana. We're fighting about walleye. We're fighting about moose over here. We're fighting about all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
And it's the same story over and over, and
we can't stop.
Yeah.
Even though there's times we can't seem to win, but you're fighting.
And the big problem is that we're in a fictitious war. We're struggling against wasting time and energy and resources. That's the war we're fighting. Every time we enter their system, try to rectify this, we lost before we even got set foot in the thing. And so we need to address that and start to get very learned about how to represent ourselves. And I think that's what we're doing here. You know, that's what we've been working on, is to, I recognized that long ago when I asked some silly questions and I got the goofiest answers you could ever imagine. There's people that are extinct, you know, and I was like, why is it that that's being stated? You know, and we can see this, like, so a good example that you could relate to quite easily, I'm sure, is the Beotha.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have all these discussions going around about a thing called the doctrine of discovery. We got these people trying to make careers about this thing about the doctrine of discovery being in Canada. And what I know is that's a bunch of hooey. If there was any case at all of being able to apply the doctrine of discovery in the Papal Bulls of Alfonso in Portugal, is Cartier and his sail around Newfoundland. And so Newfoundland is about the only place you could apply a doctrine of discovery principle, because Manhattan Island was colonized by the Dutch.
Yeah.
Quebec.
You're talking about the discoverer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and
so
Canada here, we might have the Vikings.
yeah. So New France wasn't you can't utilize the doctrines of discovery in New France. You can't apply the doctrine of discovery principles in many cases here. I can show you where they were guided. These explorers, they had native guides. There's a whole lot of things that
they applied them in law and in their court cases. St. Catherine's and Milling case is just it just bursting with doctrine of discovery. Same as the Indian Act, it's doctrine of discovery philosophy throughout the whole thing.
Yeah,
so, that's how it hits us. But yeah, the rest, even their side, probably don't even know, but their intellectuals do.
Yeah. So I find that the tug of war in the doctrine of discovery is the competing interests between two papal bulls. One is the issuance of the papal bull to Portugal, right? Mm-hmm. In that they have the ability to subjugate and exterminate Saracens, pagans, infidels, whoever they encounter. They can just slaughter them and take their property, enslave them. And then you have the interests of the Papal Bull Sublimis Dei, where it denounces enslavement of native people, and it encourages evangelization instead. And so it describes that these people are not to be enslaved, but rather you must treat with them. Mm-hmm. And so those two competing interests are, I think, at the foundations of law. And so what we're seeing as the premise of the United States Constitution and the law within it is flowing through the Alfonso Portugal Papal Bulls.
Okay, I've got to leave. I've got another meeting.
Okay,
me and Hector,
see you in a bit there.
I'm going to just move this over. You need to have some. Okay, we'll just here. All right.
So the that's the foundations of law that we're standing with, that we can address. It's a little thick when you start to get into the detail of it. It gets very thick, but on the basic principles, once you go do the hard work of understanding all of that, then you can streamline it into meaningful presentations, right? So I have an interest I have an understanding that our group is one large contiguous group, right from the shorelines all the way in here into the Mississippi River. I have notions that through the scalp laws, you know what I'm talking about? So the scalp laws that were issued against the Abenaki, in the face of that, what I had a reference to, I don't know where it is now, but I had a reference to a Mi'kmaq chief of the time when the scalp laws were made, that he issued a proclamation to everyone. Wear your totem.
Oh,
They got to where they were tattooing their totem right on their faces. Because the Mi'kmaq chief said, if I don't see your totem, you're dead meat. So they began to, that's where you would see their totems tattooed right on their faces. Because they didn't want to get killed. They wanted to be recognized. And so that's what was ordered. In the face of the scalp laws, many Mi'kmaq left the coastline and they made their way up the St. Lawrence Seaway, up the Ottawa River into James Bay and become what you call the Ojibwe Creek.
okay.
They were a mix of Dakota. So the expansion of the 13 colonies in the American colonization forced Dakota into the Northern Territories. And they became ingrained with the Mi'kmaq who had fled in the face of the scalp laws and became what we call the Ojibwe Creek. I mean, it's a bit of a scant history. It's hard to piece that together because there's so much of it that's missing. But these are the theories that I hold, that I work with, that try to uncover who's who and what's what and where did they all go? Because there was a lot of diasporas in the face of fear, that was done. So many groups found themselves relocating many times, and so it makes for a very confusing history, especially when you have observers of that history that are renaming everybody. So when you start to look in the vagaries of the identities of many groups, you're going to find that you're going to have to summarize the nomenclature that's been applied to them. So it becomes a very daunting task for any historian. So when you're going and asking for research to be conducted, you're only getting a very limited view of what you can afford in the way of a history access, right? So you can state your position. So you get these very limited views when you see the research reports that get sponsored by bank councils and things like that. So I recognized that when I was doing my research, if you just concentrated on one area, you weren't getting the whole story. You weren't getting the big picture. And so that's where I had to dig my heels in very much to start to recognize what was being done in the way of representation of history. So it's a real chore. And that's because it's not been being done properly the whole time. We've got so much information in the way of history. And so I think that we, in the current modern era, with all these wonderful tools, we've got computers and we've got internet and we've got archive.org, we've got Gutenberg Project, we got research reports coming out the wazoo out of every group since the specific claims branches opened in the 70s. Yeah. We've only been seeing anything in the way of information that's been created in the form of a research report that could be submitted to a court is only coming from the 70s to now. Before that time, the Crown had it so that it was illegal to hire a lawyer for a native group. And where that comes, it's kind of interesting how that comes about, because it's formed by the precursor to the Robinson Treaty, in that there was a thing called the Mica Bay Affair over here. And it had to do with mining interests that were being pursued and groups of people that protested those things. And so they were being advised by a legal minded person at the time by the name of Alan McDonnell. And they called him an evil advisor, the Crown, because he was trying to give them fair representation in what they were doing. So they created the laws that denied legal representation to many groups. So we're still reeling from the effects of that, and so we need to I think to get our groups together to start to combine our research.
Yeah.
And then you'll see that I think we're one big contiguous group. Like I mentioned yesterday, I was curious about the Marshall, the Bernard, and the Simon families, which are prominent families in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Which happen to be reflected here because I have an interest in it because I have Amikwabi family members that have been renamed Bernard.
Hmm.
I have Amikwabi family members that have been renamed Simon.
Yeah.
I have Marshall family members that are married into the Commanda family here. And so that whole history is curious to me to know if we're related from one end of this to the other. Something I find that's quite interesting to me is I tip one of the Ancestry.ca DNA tests.
Yeah.
So it's starting to confirm the paper genealogy I did. So I've conducted a paper genealogy. It's quite extensive. It's still a work in progress. And since doing my DNA test, it's also provided me with many more search parameters.
Hmm.
And it's expanded the view. And so what I think is showing up in those DNA reports is a snapshot of our nation.
Okay.
And so that's bound by kinship. It's bound by kinship is a huge part of our collective. So there's many issues that we could begin to work on. I see every isolated group is struggling in their claims and in their history and in their research to try to scramble to sort those things out in order to establish their position, because the pressure cooker is always going. You know, I remember the arguments of Burton Church.
Yeah.
You know, I remember that there was actual physical violence. I could see the representatives of the Crown and their shady dealings there. And, you know, there was a whole lot of stuff. I've been keeping up to a lot of these issues for a very long time. So I've been trying to keep current with everything that's happening in our territory. So how do we go about carrying on with this? Well, the first steps are to connect with everybody, and we'll find and to have the conversations and to share the information. And I think we'll be able to get a lot further along, you know. And you know, your elder sitting beside you, he's very learned, you know, and he has his perspective and he has his opinion of that perspective. And then if you introduce it into what we're dealing with over here, you'll see that it all starts to intertwine.
Yeah.
Right. And so we come away with this bigger sense of what our nation consists of. You know, we had these chats yesterday about clan and band and nation. And so we're caught with the principles of the Indian system of blood quantum in relationship to nationhood and nationality, which is a broad contrast. There's way more legal principles in nationhood and nationality than there is in the racist view of blood quantum of beneficiaries of the trust that they've created on resource extraction.
Yeah.
So we gotta try to balance this somehow. It's curious.
Well, you know, like you mentioned, this is a great opportunity for all of us, like, to share information and maybe, I don't know, create our own library, I guess I would say, our modern archives that are controlled by us, like, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a non-governmental institution, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, but because like you just mentioned right now, everything you mentioned is something that we've always known, like even subconsciously, right? That's what you've said here. I didn't even know, like that's such close relationship when it comes to that. But in my heart, I always know that you got still my family. Like, we have the same issues, we have the same barriers, we have the same challenges when it comes to every aspect of our lives. Yeah. This is the great place to, I mean, I was explaining earlier to Dell that like a lily pad, right? The growth of lily pad doubles in every day in size, but you don't see a change in the palm until day 29 or day 30 when it's completely filled. And they say that they asked when was the pond half filled with lily pads. So people do say it was 15 days ago, half of 30, right? But in actuality, it was just the day before, on the 29th.
Yeah.
The palm was half filled with lily pads. On day 28, it was only a quarter filled. So I guess we're talking about everything we talked about today. I think that we're at like maybe day 28, day 27 of what you do and what Dill does and what Hector does and what Tom does and what we're all trying to do. They're going to see it soon that, you know what, this is, they don't see all the work that's been done for forever. Like we're at we're at late 20s, we're almost at day 30, I think, where our people are going to say, whoa, let's take a step back, right?
Just to comment on some of the things you said, I first want to let you know, I totally admire all the good information that you share with us. I was deeply impressed yesterday. I didn't like what happened, but I was quite impressed with how the Mohawk men handled that dilemma. The chairman, I thought that he was a little too authoritarian by shutting them off. He did speak a little bit long, but he could have said, well, you've got 3 minutes to conclude. That would have been better, rather than shutting him off like that. But I liked his response. He could have probably spoken English, and I'm pretty certain that he would have answered in English with a few choice F words being said, and that would have been good. But he chose to answer him in the Mohawk language, and he was quite decisive in how he said it and what he wanted to say. I don't like that. I want you to know, though, first and foremost, our number one reason for coming here and to being at Six Nations yesterday is that the wampum belt was finally put on the agenda item. I would like you to know, of course, I'm not exactly sure if you're from Matawaki or you're from Akwesasne. I don't know that, but I would like if you could tell me, please. Are you? Where's your home, Akwesasne or Matawaki?
I'm from Pictou, which is French River.
Are you Mohawk or Algonquin?
I'm in the middle between them, and I'm Amikwabi.
Well,
So
I only ask
I'm
you,
curious about Amikwa and Micmac.
I asked you that because I wanted to be a little bit precise, and you probably are, and I just don't know. But you see, like, our relationship with the Iroquois is old and is valuable, and it was the Iroquois who presented the Micmac with the first wampum belts. After a mean, ugly battle, the Mohawk said, these cruelties must end now, and we need to begin a new relationship. And people are now talking about 1701. I don't know a whole lot about that, but I do know that the wampum belts were exchanged from the Iroquois to the Micmac at that time, and that was a valuable historical event, and still is for us, enough so to bring us here.
Yeah.
So now what I say is that You can correct me if I'm wrong in a little bit. First of all, I am hereditary. My title in Micmac is Putus. Putus is about our treaty rights, our Aboriginal rights. That's a new word, but still Aboriginal rights, our wampum belts, and our laws. I'm hereditary in that way. And sometimes I'm called an elder, but of course I'm not very comfortable with that title because that has to do with age more so than knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what I would like to suggest to you, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me, and if I'm very wrong, I would like to ask for your kind understanding and your good open-mindedness. We are reacting, and that's not a good thing. The Indian Act has all the power over our lives. We're finally dusting off our wampum belts, our treaties, and I would like you to know that I held the title of National Chief of the Atlantic Region. I did sit around a constitutional conference table, and we did put in place, give new life to our wampum belts, our treaties, and the recognition of our mothers, our aunties, our grandmothers, our wives, and our daughters. So what we essentially did was put in place our own philosophical doctrine, giving it new life. We are matriarchal. Some of us may not be comfortable with that because, you know, we're so highly influenced by the Indian Act, which is patriarchal. So that puts us in conflict with them or them in conflict with us. And the only way, based on what you told me, and I admire what you said, our new life totally depends on how willing we are going to be to accept our own philosophical matriarchal doctrine as our foundation. You know, we can look at all these Indian Act chiefs, millionaires. Many of them are driving around, and people who are loyal to them driving around in $110,000 pickup trucks and like that, you know, and that's their value. My value is what I listen to you say. My value is in this man. He is the grandson of well, we used to believe hereditary Micmac Grand Chief Gabriel Syllaboy. His grandfather took the Micmac Treaty of 1752 to court, and the court sided against him on February the 10th, 1927. But he did that. And see, this is a legacy for you, for us, and we're now here. You and I are talking now. We are all talking now, and that's the beginning of new life and a new relationship for us. But we also want the wampum belt to be on the table, to be on the agenda all the time. I was so impressed with yesterday when someone said, "Oh, we got about 15 different wampum." Wow, I like that. And I didn't know that. I just knew that there's wampum, but I didn't know as much as what I was told yesterday. So I don't want us to be strangers. I hope that in due time, not too long from now, we'll be sitting around the same table. I liked what you said yesterday. I did. I didn't say nothing, but I liked it. And those are the words that we have been lacking. But I'm going to ask you sincerely, I mean, how much of what you say and how much of what you believe is reacting to what the Indian Act is all about? We know the Act is a racist policy. We know that it's very much alive. 633 Indian Act chiefs in place right now. All of the Indian organizations are theirs. They're the board of directors of that. So we know it's there. If you were Mohawk, you will speak objectively on the 2 rows of wampum, and that's a good place to go. That's a good place to be founded on. Us, we believe that we're more sovereign than anyone else. I always held the belief that we're only second to the Mohawk, but now I'm beginning to doubt that. So, you know, we have treaties, sovereign treaties. We were the first to recognize the independence of the United States of America on July the 1976, at the request of Washington, General Washington, and their Continental Congress in Philadelphia. They invited our ancestors to meet with them in the colony of Massachusetts Bay in Boston. We did that. We have treaties signed with the sovereign King of England, King George III. So I'm not going to say this in too much detail, but I'm going to ask you to find what I'm going to tell you now. Do your best to find a written edition of England's Constitution, and I'm almost certain you're going to be extremely pleased to read sections of it that's going to tell you, give you some answers to some of the questions you might have some doubt about. But I'm not going to say much more than that. But if we can meet again, maybe we can arrange a little side room kind of meeting with a few of us, and we'll share some, what I'm going to call vital information. Thank you.
So,
So to reply to that, there's a few things I could demonstrate. So one, firstly, for me, in the whole gist of my rant, I think, is that Indian title forms Indian acts. There's no such thing as an Indian.
yeah,
And a Métis is a half an Indian. What do you got? Right? So clearly we have original titles. You know, they're represented in here. We can see that they were describing themselves.
yeah,
We're still in that same position. We have to identify ourselves properly. Right? So that's the first step, is knowing who and what we are. We're going by what they said, what they wrote. We're constantly in this position.
yeah.
Our history is oral. You know, to interpret all that, well, that's a chore. And we have so much interpretation that's gone on. Those words that were said in the origin have been twisted and turned into other purposes, you know, so we need to continue to define it as best as we can. So, you know, are you aware of the works of Stephen J. Augustine?
Not aware, but I know he's got the work going.
I have
Okay.
mixed feelings with him, sincerely. Does not have the integrity. Does not.
So the works of Augustine have been, okay, so as the curator of the Museum of Civilization, you know this? Okay, so Stephen, I found myself sitting in Stephen's Lodge in northern Quebec at one point. I went to Stephen's Lodge and he expressed to me that he was holding the 1610 Concordat as a point of reference under the Mi'kmaq identity and history. He said that he'd made an entourage of people, and they approached the Geneva Conventions, carrying the wampum of the Concordat. And he took that into their convention, and he expressed a desire for relief based upon that treaty. And he was turned away. And they told him, that's not a treaty. And they were upset that this had happened. And so I expressed to him that it isn't a treaty. And do you know why? Because the wampum is not a treaty.
And you're right.
It's a receipt.
He's wrong.
Yeah. So the currency of our nation, all the way to the interior of the Mississippi River, was created by the Mi'kmaq women, and the authenticity of the currency of the wampum. A white bead being one beaver skin, and a purple bead being two. All commodity of our trade relationships in the interior here, the Huron, the Iroquois, the Dakota, all formed upon the basis of the currency, the value of the beaver skin in relationship to all other commodity. Authenticated by the Mi'kmaq women's hands, which was then usurped and infiltrated and reduced and then replaced by French and English currencies. Wampum was carried on the sea. It was once a maritime principle of trade. It was carried onto the ships. It went out into the rest of the world. It was there. It was present. And we need to, just from that bit of information, we can start to establish that our sovereignty through our own trade network. You know, that's what we witnessed yesterday in Ken's view of it.
Yeah.
So we need to start to establish, to resurrect our trade network, to reform those principles of those wampum.
Yeah, and then, you know, this is one of the things that we're gonna do today. But we're gonna talk about this, where they sent me a letter. I guess Tom can share you the letter where they said that RCMP came to my shop Friday, basically telling me I'm unauthorized, whatever the hell they think I am, and told me to produce some documentation by 12 p.m. Friday.
Yeah.
So there, now we're also doing we're gonna do a video of we're gonna have a discussion around this paper.
Yeah.
In our discussion here, and then we're gonna develop a video, and then Tom's gonna edit it, and we're gonna share it on our page, and when, you know, we're gonna put everything up that's here, that anything that we have that we just talked about that's relevant to our trade routes, right? And I think that we're very fortunate about like Facebook and all that we'll be able to get some audience in regards to sharing this video or sharing our documentations with our members or communities, because that's what's lacking, man. It's we don't have an educational, we don't have they don't teach this anywhere, right? And this is where everybody comes in, where you come in, and Bill,
Excuse me.
you guys are the professors, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I turn a few heads. They don't know how to manage the information I provide, because they want it compartmentalized.
Yeah, and I think that's wrong, because then it's going to be tweaked to like everything else you said. When it comes to benefits for them, it's always been the case. It's always been something that they negotiated that benefit them. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so do you know what that symbolizes? Right?
Yeah.
This symbol, this motto is symbolizing divide and conquer.
Yeah.
That letter you just hold up to me,
Yeah.
you find yourself defending,
Yeah.
right? Always.
Always.
So that is a principle. It's an act of divide and conquer. Everybody can agree with the principles of divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Right? You go within your ranks of your community and you start to describe divide and conquer to them, reflected through that letter you just held up.
Yeah.
Do you know what the technical terms for divide and conquer are?
No, I don't.
Apartheid and genocide. Apartheid and genocide are crimes.
Yes.
That letter you held up has criminal intent written into it based upon this principle.
Yeah.
That's the province that wrote you that letter, is it not?
Yes.
This one? Hold them to it. Describe to them the crime that they're committing.
Yeah.
And that we won't accept it. We're tired of watching our people die for nothing.
Yeah.
Spending entire lives trying to struggle against it.
Yeah.
We're wasting our time. We need to do something else.
We are beginning with our wampum. We have just this picture, but we also know the history of our wampum belts. Our wampum belts, unlike what that letter says, this is our foundation, this is our integrity. We will there. And this wampum belt, I'm not saying exactly this one, but these are the Mohawk people who gave this wampum belt to the Micmac. and it was exchanged 3 times that I know of. One was brought to the Restigouche River by the Iroquois in 1852, given to the Micmac chiefs and their wives. At that time, there was no Indian Act. Again, the last time that I know of was between his grandfather, Gabriel Sillaboy, at the place called Muligawach, where the Iroquois and the Micmac exchanged wampum belts in 1962. And as far as I know, it hasn't been done yet. But I do know, because I sat at this meeting, and an Iroquois man got up from the table and he gave me a copy of a wampum belt. And that was on the 14th of April, 2017. So not that long ago. So these wampum belts are on the minds of us and the Iroquois and probably yourself. And this is the beginning of the right direction for us to go. The Indian Act system, we're all imposed on with their values, and money is their value and their God. We have to understand and we have to realize that the values are the foundation for people's sanity. Mess with your sanity and they'll kill us. So we have to realize that. That's their tool, their values. Imposed on us is the millions that each band council, each chief and council have. Some in our Atlantic region have a budget of $88 million a year. Some of these Indian Act chiefs, they're writing checks. They're the signers of checks, maybe $7,300,000 a month. Where I live, it's only $2,700,000. Still, that's how they control people. And they even control me, but not in the same way. They control me by giving me the smallest amount of whatever. I don't want it anyway, but I'm just telling you that's how they do it. So we need to get away from that. This is our foundation.
So, so going to that, not adding to that, but going back to what we're going to do today. I don't know, our conversation was recorded, right? Just in case that we said something interesting that would pop, we can use.
Well, if you let me rant, I'll show you all kinds of interesting.
Yeah, of course, rant away. But we're gonna take pieces that relevant to what we're trying to do, and we're trying to educate people on a more faster way, like, because for some reason I got 500 and some odd followers on my page from just my community, and that's a lot. 500 people. That's 10% of the population, right?
Yeah.
And
I've had some Facebook friends along the way that I managed to connect with a little bit from your region. And 2 of these are namely, and they're very vocal and very active, which is Doreen Bernard and Elizabeth Marshall.
Elizabeth Marshall's sister, my oldest sister.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with Elizabeth. I have little chats here and there about some of the situation that she reports in her day-to-days of her protests or her views or whatever. So I'm familiar with trying to keep up through her perspective of what happens in your region. So, I'm trying to, like I said, pay attention to everything that's going on in our greater territories.
Yeah.
The solutions to some of our resource-based issues can be dealt with. I believe that we have very strong positions that we can assert, and you have to begin to ask yourself the position of what you refer to as treaty in relationship to any land, because I saw through the throes of the claims of your group when the provincial attorneys returned saying that you were conquered peoples and the uproar that caused.
Yeah.
Isn't that this?
Yeah.
Everything's rolling through this, isn't it? You got to get rid of this.
Yeah.
This is a mythical creature. It's fiction. I have a hard time relating or speaking with or advising fiction.
Mm.
Fiction is fraud.
Yeah.
Fraud is a crime. Simple stuff. You just got to recognize it. And you got to be able to represent the truth. And they've tried very hard to confuse everything. You know, and Acts of the Crown, you know, what your elder mentioned, you know, the Constitution of England. Well, get yourself out your computer and type up the Concession of John.
Concession of John.
Concession of John is where King John in 1213 was excommunicated by the Pope for trying to denounce Christianity in England. And he banned Sunday Mass. That got him excommunicated, which John quickly realized that all his patrons were Christians. And if you're excommunicated by the Pope, you're going straight to hell. You can't have a king going to hell when you're a Christian nation. So he begged and begged for the excommunication to be lifted. The Pope says to him, well, sign over England. I'll consider it. We'll have a relationship through that. And so John did that. He conceded England to the papacy. The barons of England weren't very happy with that. So what they did, they made under duress, they made John sign the Magna Carta at knife point, which caused the Pope to consider that a reneging of the concession and seize the crown. The crown sits in the basement in the Vatican. You wonder why there's graves in the schoolyards at the hands of the church. We have the issue of, for your people, with the Concordat, Christianity splattered all over it. We have to define this. We have to set it straight. People want to be offended because we're working with freedoms that they believe they have. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Oh boy, try and do what we do for work. You'll realize very quickly that there's censorship of all forms, that there's all kinds of vices and pressure and situations that come along and steer you away from the real truth of the matter. So we need to concentrate on that. Getting sidetracked by dazzle and flash and fancy and, you know, there's a whole lot of greed that we have to contend with. You know, in the recent release of the pandemic, a very factual piece of evidence was revealed to all of us. What happened to the toilet paper?
Mm.
That's pure evidence that everybody, the way it's set up, is only concerned with their own ass, covering it. Right? Oh, yeah. This is.
These are just a reminder to keep thinking the way we used to think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you hold them to the crime that they're actually committing, we may get somewhere. Because really, and when we boil down to our legal position, is one that we hold them to shame. This is shameful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's shameful. You can't operate like this. But they do. And why do we put up with it? And why do we entertain it? Well, at the end of this shame, they've empowered a gun. Pay us, we'll protect you.
Mm.
You know, and so we're sitting here, the current system that we're being proposed as our leadership is one that says we need to extinguish or surrender our rights in order to exist, which is completely in contradiction to the principles in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Modern day treaty making is illegal under the Charter because it proposes to surrender or extinguish rights. What we need to start to begin, what we need to begin to concentrate on is non-treaty agreements. Truly, we have no treaties. We have none. We may have some semblance of a coexistence, or we may have some semblance, but we don't have actual verifiable coexistence agreements. That's what we need. We don't need to defend. We don't need to conquer. We need to coexist. So they need to get a whole big dose of this. And I think collectively, if we approach them in our unified nation, they're going to tremble, and they're going to trip, and they're going to fall, because they can't sustain what they propose. And it's only held through duress, coercion, fear, right?
I'm just thinking of something I was going to advise them on. Once you send your letter in, why don't you write in at the bottom, let the racial trial begin.
Yeah. So racism, you know the race that we're dealing with. You want to deal with systemic racism? Guess what? They created a new race of people. You know what they call that race? The rat race. The rat race consists of slaves. Every one of them is enslaved by the rat race. They're running around looking for that little food that's been hidden in the corner, and praying that the water's clean, and that they should come along and the running wheel is going to be oiled. They run on that wheel. The politics of this country is the wheel in the hamster cage. They went there long ago and they placed paper on the bottom of the cage. They told everybody, oh, we'll come along every once in a while. We'll fill the water, and we'll fill the food dish, and we'll oil the wheel, and we'll come change the paper when the shit gets piled too high. Well, we're up to here in the shit, and they never come change the paper. See?
Yeah.
Time to get out of the cage.
Well, the English quit giving out presents in 1860.
So I think that, I'm trying to give you a layman's view of this for you to understand.
Yeah.
If I went technical on you guys, I'd lose you.
Yeah.
Because I can get very technical about these things. And it disturbs me to no end that we're running in circles, chasing a tail we don't even have. And so Dell's quite aware of it. I'm quite aware of it.
At some point, you got to stand up.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it's all lost.
Yeah.
But
And
some guys that start doing it too, and that's hopefully what's not only happening now, but it's going to happen.
And so what they hope for us to do in the pressure cooker they've placed us within to live, they expect us to defend with a sword. They never expected us to be able to defend with a pen.
Mm.
And the pen is mightier than the sword, and I truly believe that. And so we need to get our big old pencil sharpener out and start sharpening it up. Because it can be very substantial once we assemble it in its correctness. First of all, we have to do the hard work that's involved in to establish it, and by doing that exercise, our children are going to benefit. Because they're not going to have to now wander around aimlessly trying to find the truth. There's so many versions of it. We're going to have to sit down collectively, I think, and establish what the truth actually looks like. And come to a consensus amongst ourselves. And so, like yesterday, the exercise of the symbolism contained within the 1701 agreement can be a platform that we all stand upon. I heard one of the elders denouncing this as being anything substantial. But it is a symbol. It's a symbol to all of us that our ancestors did this.
Yeah.
And that we can all rally around it. We're 1701 is obviously a quite a distance between then and now. We're quite a stretch, but what's interesting is the continuity that we can express here. We had quite a few representatives that are reflecting their ancestry and their descendancy flowing through this. This is the only document that I could see that has any substance. Within all the documents I've seen that have been related to this formation of this thing called Canada, this is the only one that seems to have any decency within it. Something that's, and it's oozing with coexistence. The English aren't part of this.
Yeah.
We need to bring the English into this. They say they inherited it through the conquest of New France.
Yeah.
That's what they say, and they've disregarded. So this document, I can make the link available. I'll give it to Tom, but I had to work very hard. This is a very obscure document within the Archives of Canada.
Mhm.
But it is in the Archives of Canada. It's not it's not just a French document. It was carried on by the English through the conquest of New France. They say that they inherited all the titles of New France when they conquested. The issues of England flow through the conquest of the Dutch on Manhattan Island. So how does England claim discovery when all it did was conquest? They can't do it. That's why I expressed to you the only principle of discovery they could have is in relationship to Newfoundland. Newfoundland has a very interesting situation. It was a penal colony. In the early times, it was referred to as Isla de Demoni, the Isle of Demons. And that's not in relationship to the Mi'kmaq or the Pictou. That's in relationship to the penal colony they set up there, which caused the extinction through the principles of discovery, that you could subjugate or exterminate Saracens, pagans, and infidels wherever they find. And they sent convicted criminals to form a colony in the island of Newfoundland, and lo and behold, the Beothuk are extinct, which I think is a load of hooey.
Yeah.
So we're watching now currently the issue of they call it Newfoundland gold, right? So there's been mining exploration that's being proposed there in a big way. The people of Newfoundland, who were these, they held their own sovereign government until 1950 or so, when they were
Join Canada.
added to Canada.
Mm.
And now we're watching the poor Newfoundlanders jumping for joy because they get a job on resource extractions that currently could be held more beneficial to them, but there they are under the auspice of Canada, being diminished in their position. So everybody needs to start to refine this better. I know we're facing much turmoil in trying to address it, and it doesn't help when you have people that think they can rule with a sword.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to meet everybody along this journey of trying to relay this information. And I've found myself through my association with my lawyer friend, which has been a 20-year excursion. And just that experience alone has helped broaden my horizon in relationship to what I think is our nation. And I think the historical divisions that exist there really have no substance. We need to concentrate on kinship. So like I said, if you want to contribute to the big picture of it, I think we should carry on with the DNA program and try to see, where we're all establishing kinships. It sure helps. Through the throes of the experts of the province of Ontario, I had occasion to party testimony in a case called the Robinson Treaty Annuities case. And one of the Crown experts in that case made an interesting statement. And so we can hold them to it. And in his statement, he says, totems are unreliable. We just had an exercise in totems reliability yesterday from 1700. So interesting. Next statement he makes is, oral history can be useful, but only if it has a document to back it up.
Yeah.
So I expressed to you yesterday that my oral history of my grandfather, that I came up with a document to back it up. He says, well, genealogy, if you have genealogy, then you really have something. So we need to concentrate on those things. We have to seriously define treaty, what that is, because I can show you Supreme Court rulings that state Indian does not include non-treaty Indians. And so I'm finding a whole lot of non-treatiness in our history, and it's just being covered up. And Dell is of the view that we have treaty rights, and that extends whether or not there's one signed or not. But those exist in our realm, that we are treaty people on an international scale, not on this limited Indian subjugation, extermination agenda, but more in the view of coexistence on an international scale. And the international scale I refer to is not the corporate United Nations. It's in the Indigenous United Nations around the globe.
It's kind of like we all have the same drum, the same drum sounds.
Yeah. So I think we could take our plight, our information, will appeal to Indigenous groups in other parts of the world that have been subjected to the British Commonwealth on this divide and conquer. And we need to be a leader in the voices that we can create here, because the information we have is solid. I think we're on the edge of something major here, and we're just scratching the surface. And the leaderships that we're finding in the hereditary version of our existence are slowly, methodically uncovering the truth. The realizations, the circumstances, and the ramifications can be clearly identified.
Yeah, the truth is going to cause them to change their decisions.
Yeah, and we hold them to shame. Shame on you.
Exactly.
That's our motivator, because we can't arm wrestle them into any of this change. We can't buy them out. What do we got left? Right? We have our internal view, and then we have our external position of their shame, of whoever they is. We are yet even to determine who they is, because standing here fighting with bureaucrats about policies that have no legitimacy is a waste of our time. Because a bureaucrat will stand there and tell you, oh, I'm just doing my job. Right? Holding a policy that's older than dirt, comes from Rome 2,700 years ago. That's the first occurrence of Indian that I can show you.